Amen. Come on, let's give it up for the worship team tonight. Come on, it feels good to be in the house of the Lord. It feels good to be back to high school ministry. I feel like it's been like forever with those couple of weeks that we had off. But man, it feels good to be home and be together to worship. I'm excited for this night, guys. I honestly had an extra week to kind of look over this message because I was supposed to teach 2 weeks ago, the week before Easter, and so I actually had like the last 2 weeks to look over this, and I love it. I was kind of bummed out that we had to miss high school ministry, but I love that I could just spend some more time in this. And as I was spending more time in this, I was kind of like thinking about like the overarching theme of Ecclesiastes. And traditionally, it's known that King Solomon was the one that this book is about. And some people debate about whether or not this is true or if it was just another king in the Davidic line. But regardless of that fact, we're going to be looking at King Solomon's life as though this was a case study for what we're going to be seeing in Ecclesiastes. And also, as I was kind of studying this passage in Ecclesiastes 2, I was thinking to myself, man, what is like a King Solomon in my life? And I was like thinking, well, it's kind of hard to compare that because the dude, like, we're going to learn about who this guy was, but this dude was wise, he was powerful, he was wealthy, successful beyond, like, you can even imagine. So I'm thinking to myself, like, who's someone that I could personally talk to that's just older and wiser and speak to, like, the younger generation? So I actually called my grandpa, and this is a picture of me and my grandpa. This is Grandpa Byrne, guys. Bernard Bolema. Little fun fact, my little brother Chandler, his middle name is Bernard, after this guy. So you guys can make fun of him because he's got an old man name. But this is my grandpa. He came to visit our church about a month and a half ago, watched me lead worship for the first time ever. It was a special thing because this man is a huge reason why I'm in ministry today. This man loves the Lord, just oozes scripture, and the thing you got to know about my grandpa, for fun, this guy reads his Bible, studies the thickest books that you can imagine, and he listens to sermons all day. I'm not exaggerating on that. If I went to his house tonight, he would be watching a sermon from David Jeremiah, John Piper, John MacArthur, all these guys. If I went to his house tomorrow morning, he'd be reading his Bible for 3 hours. It's weird, but also deep down, I'm like, man, I want to be like my grandpa one day. And I hope that's kind of true for you. I hope you have someone to look forward to who just loves the Lord so much and just wants to know everything about him. And as I'm kind of looking at my grandpa and talking to him, I actually called him and asked him, hey grandpa, do you have anything from Ecclesiastes that you know? What do you know about this book? What do you know about King Solomon? Help an older, have an older guy speaking to a younger guy. And he just starts rambling first. He's well, if you go to Ecclesiastes, you got to go to Revelation. If you go to Revelation, you got to go to Daniel. You got to go to Daniel. You got to go to Romans. And actually, you got to talk about the Old Testament too. And I'm well, that's not really helpful, Grandpa. I got to talk about Ecclesiastes too. Let's stay on subject here. Old people. Am I right? Come on. And he just but the point was, it wasn't really helpful for Ecclesiastes, but the point was, this man just loves the Word of God. And just reads it and just knows it so much that he can't stop talking about it. And as I'm thinking about Ecclesiastes, I don't know if you have a Grandpa Byrne like I do, but I don't want you to think that this book is irrelevant to you guys. Okay, this is just some old guy, successful guy, just talking about at the end of his life, what he did in life and what is he teaching at the end of his life. I don't want you to think that this is irrelevant. Honestly, as I'm reading more and more about this book, guys, this is the most relevant book for our generation that I can think of. And I'm so happy that we're in this to close out the year, because I know deep down every single one of us wants to be like King Solomon in some way. All right, it's kind of unobtainable to have everything that he had, but in some level, the power, the wisdom, the wealth, the pleasure that he experienced, some of us deep down we want that. Nobody's in this room right now who's Man, for my future, I'd love to graduate with a mediocre GPA, and then I'd love to go to like a mediocre college, meet like a mediocre spouse, eventually have a mediocre marriage with some mediocre kids and a mediocre home, and die miserable and lonely. Right? Like nobody's there tonight. I know like all of us are in this place where we want a good, fulfilling, and satisfying life. Die Hard fans in the room? You guys like Die Hard? All right, we got one over there. William Wallace said, "Every man dies, but not every man really lives." And I think that's kind of so fitting for this. Like in Ecclesiastes 2, we are laid out that there are two paths to happiness in life. And sadly, one of these paths will lead us to what we learned 3 weeks ago, the word havel, which is like vapor, meaningless, gone in an instant, doesn't matter. One of the paths of life, yeah, you can enjoy some things in this world, but at the end of it all, you're going to be left frustratingly empty. And so I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to listen to an older, wiser man, because our very happiness is at stake. You guys with me on this? Yeah? You guys are with me? All right, well, let's look at Ecclesiastes 2. What we're going to do is we're just going to read verses 1 through 10, and then we're going to dive into it, and we're going to look at it a little closer. So let's look at verse 1 together. I'm just going to read this straight through. It says, "I said in my heart, 'Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven, under the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines," which is prostitutes, if you don't know what that was, "the delight of sons of man. So I became great. I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me." Verse 10, this is key, guys. Listen to this. "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil." So what I really want you to see at first, guys, is this point that this man was gifted. This man had a lot. And in chapters 2 through 6, you'll hear the phrase, gift from God, from the hand of God, like 6 or 7 times. And it's making the point that, yes, Solomon was gifted, and he had a lot, but our point 1 tonight is this, is that gifts were designed by God. Gifts were designed by God. Colossians 1:16, all things were created through him and for him. What percent of the things created did God make? 100%. Or what about Matthew 7:9 through 11? Which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asked for a fish, who will give him a serpent? So it's like I'm sitting at home with my dad, and we're cooking dinner, and he's like, "Hey, Al, what do you want?" And I'm like, "I'd like a steak, medium cooked. I want some garlic mashed potatoes." Come on, garlic mashed potatoes, anybody? Yeah. There's some good stuff. "And I want some asparagus on the side. I want a lemonade." And he puts before me some gas station sushi and says, "Here you go, buddy, love you." Right? I'm like, that doesn't fly. Like, I want this, and you're giving me this. No. And then he says, "If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him." Listen, guys, God is the giver of good gifts. All right? He's the one who is giving these things to him. Maybe you've experienced this before, guys. I know when I was in high school, this was a huge thing for me. This absolutely rocked my faith. Is at some point in your spiritual journey, maybe a leader, maybe a Christian will come to you and say, man, you can't do that. Or you shouldn't do that. And usually the thing that Christians say that you can't and shouldn't do, generally things that you want to do, right? Like naturally I'm like, well, in high school I'm like, well, I want to do that. Like I want to pursue that. That feels good. I like that. That's a good thing. And listen, guys, the point is, I thought in my mind, like, well, if God was good and he was for me, then why isn't he not letting me have these things that I want? Like this thing that I'm naturally wanting, this is what I'm pursuing, is going to give me happiness. Why is God keeping me from that? And listen, no. Like, gifts are good, but there is a place for the gifts. And then there's a way that we can steward the things that God has given us. And so maybe, again, you guys are in this room and you're like, okay, Al, I get it, like King Solomon had a lot, all right, but like, who gives a rip what King Solomon has to say in my life? Like, how does this play into my life? And I get that, and I understand that. I was kind of at the very first part, but as I continue to read, when you understand the magnitude of what King Solomon had, and then what he says in this book, it's pretty crazy. And so I just want to paint a picture of King Solomon, if we could, right now. These verses are going to be on the screen. This is King Solomon, guys. 1 Kings 4:22. Solomon's daily provision, keyword daily. Daily provision were 30 cores of the finest flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. And you guys are like, what is choice fowl? What is roebuck? Like, what is cores? All these things. And historians and theologians would estimate that this amount of food would be enough to feed 14,000 people. Okay, this is his daily provision. Let's keep reading. Verse 26. Solomon had 40,000 stalls for chariot horses and 12,000 horsemen. 1 Kings 10:26 would go on to say, Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots. Okay, guys, in the ancient, like, Near East, in this time, chariots would equate to cars. And so, as we're, like, thinking to ourselves, okay, MTV Cribs, this dude's got 16 cars. Oh my gosh. Okay, King Solomon had 1,400 chariots. Like, just out in his, like, lawn in front of his patio with the 14,000 people a day meal type amazing food. All right, like, not convinced. Like, let's look at some more facts about Solomon. Okay, theologians would estimate that King Solomon's yearly income was $1 billion a year. $1 billion. He composed 3,000 proverbs, which is like wisdom books, and over 1,000 songs. And here's where it turns. He had 700 wives. 700 wives. And 300 concubines, which again, prostitutes. Can we agree that this dude, like, had a lot? All right, whether it's good or not, this dude had a lot, okay? And so if you're tempted to, like, downplay, like, Solomon and what he had, I just want to, like, graciously and lovingly tell you that, like, in every aspect of life, guys, Solomon did it better. Solomon had more than you and I will ever have combined and forever will have. Like, this man had everything. And so if this guy's, like, talking at the end of his life, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to listen. Like, I want to hear what this guy has to say at the end of his life. And so, again, we're just going to read through Ecclesiastes 2 again, 1 through 10, and we're just going to pick this apart and look at this again with a better vision of who this guy was. So verse 1 again. It says, I said in my heart. Anybody else, like, love talking to themselves? All right, if Gracie knows this, and you can ask her, this is true. I, like, drive my car, and maybe you guys talk to yourself, and, like, that's a cute dog. Look at that house. Look at their lawn. That's cute. I could do that. That sounds cool. Like, anybody else talk to themselves like me? I'm just really embarrassing myself right now. So he said in his heart. So he's talking to himself. Come now. I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this was all vanity. And I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? And then he's going to tell us this experiment, this thing that he pursued in life. And this was his experiment, verse 3. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. And so he first starts in his life with all of the things that he has in life. He says, you know what? I'm going to please myself with alcohol. I know some of you guys have experimented with this, and I know like some high schoolers, you're like experimenting with alcohol or substances and stuff. Can we agree that like you guys never get like the good stuff? It's always like the cheap, like the 30 rack of Natty Daddies or some gross like cheap beer or something like that. Okay, just to paint a picture, Solomon had his own vineyards, guys. He had his own label for his alcohol. Okay, this man like makes his own stuff. He's the king. He has the finest stuff at his hands. You know why alcohol never satisfied this guy? It's because at best, alcohol numbs the reality of what's going on in your life. It is a band-aid on your situation in life. He tried it. Didn't work. Verse 4, I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of the growing trees. Okay, some of you guys might have like a second house, a lake house, cottage, something like maybe you got like a pool in your backyard or something. Okay, this guy had like multiple pools throughout his palace that were feeding forests that he owned in his property. Okay, this man like had a lot. Okay, verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. He's having slaves and slaves on slaves. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered myself silver and gold, there's the money, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers. All right, we got Spotify accounts. This dude literally owns the artists, okay, guys? This dude owns Beyonce and Jay-Z's name. Okay, he's got singers in his house. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. He was smart. And again, here it is, verse 10. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. So Solomon's in a unique situation. He's the wealthiest person in the world. He's the smartest person in the world. He's got the most power that you could possibly, he's got the highest title that you could possibly obtain in the world. He's got hundreds of the most beautiful women in the world at his fingertips for his sexual gratification. He, at any moment, he could experience every financial, pleasurable, and sexual fantasy become reality like that. He's got it all. And this is what he concludes. Verse 11. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Do you see what he's saying? See, this is a man who, seemingly what our culture would say is he's got everything that you would want. And yet this is a man that is saying at the end of his life, yeah, I've got all these things. I feel as though I've got nothing. I feel as though I have nothing. And so we ask ourselves, how? Like, dude, how could you not be satisfied with that? How could you not be fulfilled with that? And it's a pretty great question. And the problem is our culture says to ourselves, man, if you're not satisfied with what you have right now, then you just need to get more of it. Like if you're not satisfied with your income, you probably just need to get a raise. You're not satisfied with the pleasure that you're having, you probably just need to go find it in another way. And we see this play out time and time again in our relationships, right? Things get hard. Things aren't suiting our needs. We're not being fulfilled by what we think we deserve, and so we check out. Or we look at what we buy, right? We don't have this thing, they have this thing, and I know if I have this thing, then I'll be happy, and it never satisfies. What about pornography? Well, I can't be pleased by a real person right now. So maybe I could just look at this screen and be fulfilled this way. Has that ever worked? Has that ever worked? Do you ever feel fulfilled? The cycle continues. You want to know why fulfillment evaded Solomon? Because pleasure always demands more pleasure. Our culture screams it. We know it to be true. If I'm not being pleased by this, I just need more. I just need more. I just need more. Or I just need something else. And it just distorts the reality of what's going on in our culture. And why is this true? It's because, yes, gifts are good. And yes, they are from God. But they were never to be meant to worship. This is our second point, guys. Gifts weren't designed to worship. So here's what I mean about this. Have you guys ever seen anybody use something that's clearly not meant to be used that way? You know what I'm talking, like you see someone like working out at the gym, you're like, bro, that's not how you do that, or that is not a great form, or something like. Okay, just a little disclaimer. I'm about to show a video. This is really embarrassing, okay? I made this video like sophomore year of college for a competition about the sport that I played. I played golf. So I'm just going to play this video. I'm going to receive some major flack from this, so go ahead and play the video. People always wonder, how do golfers work out? I gotta say, that's a great question. That's good stuff. You still love me, Gracie? Awesome, cool. Man, that's important. That was really embarrassing. That's going to be memorable for me forever. But here's the point, guys. Right? If God is the designer, if He's the one who creates these gifts, then He has the patent for the gifts, right? Like if He's the designer, He knows how it should work. Okay? And sadly, so often we try and project our own desire on how we should spend our money, how we should find pleasure, what we should do in our life, how we should experience power. We try and project what we want these things to be made for, and the sad reality is God has the patent. God is the designer of the gifts, and these gifts weren't these gifts weren't meant to be worshipped in the way that we are worshiping them. And so Solomon takes this turn in this experiment in life, and he's revealing to us that he's not being satisfied by these things. And so in verse 16, he continues and says, "For the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance. Seeing that in the days to come, all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after wind." Again, Solomon is showing us, guys, that under the sun, in this world, if life is all about pursuing gifts, anxiety, depression, sorrow, sadness make perfect sense. Right? If life was about pursuing these gifts in and of themselves and worshiping these things that God has given us, man, how depressing that is. Because this man has it all, and at the end of his life he's saying, didn't satisfy, didn't fulfill, not happy, it's pointless, makes perfect sense, because why would it fulfill? Gifts were not meant to be worshipped. Blaise Pascal says, "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus." So let's look how he concludes this chapter. Let's look at verse 24. He says, "There is nothing better for a person than he should eat and drink and find enjoyment." Can you hear the hopelessness in his words? "This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from Him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and is striving after wind. Guys, the Bible is so clear that if you want to bank your life on finding happiness and fulfillment in the things in this life that are not God, you're just going to be dissatisfied. And I know you probably heard that a long time ago. You hear this all the time in church. We studied it a little bit today in the service if you were here, that you will not be satisfied for what this world offers. Man, if you can get to the point where you actually believe that and take action towards that, you're not going to end up like King Solomon. So this leads us to our last point. That's this: we were designed to worship the giver of gifts. If we're not, if gifts are good and we're not designed to worship the gifts themselves, it makes sense to worship the one who created the gifts. Amen? Let's look how he writes this in Ecclesiastes 3, 9 through 15. He says, "What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart." You see the satisfaction, the fulfillment that we're longing for? God put it in our hearts. "Yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end, I perceive that there is nothing better for them to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil, because this is the gift to man from God." Verse 14, "I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away." Do you see the two paths he lays out? There's an eternal path, and there's a fleeting, short-term path. Verse 14, "But whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him." And I need to ask you guys the question as we come to a close: what's going to prevent you tonight from getting to the end of your life and saying to yourself, "I just thought that there would be more"? What's going to prevent you from getting to the end of your life and asking the question, "Man, I really thought that life would be more"? Jesus said in John 4, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to you for eternal life." Listen, some of you in this room, you're going to be wealthy one day, and I hope that happens for you. That's a really cool thing. That's a gift, man. Some of you are going to have a lot of power. You might have employees. You might be business owners or something like that. Someday you're going to have power. People are going to report to you. Hopefully a lot of us in this room are going to fall in love, get married, and experience the joy and the pleasure of marriage. And I hope that happens for you. But listen, we have a choice to make with the gifts that God has given us and will give us every single day, and it's this: are we going to see the things that God gives us as gifts, or are we going to see these as God? Are we going to elevate these things that God has given us to the platform of God? And I know none of us would really say in this room, "Man, money's my God. Having a relationship, that's my God." I understand you probably wouldn't admit that, but functionally, the way you live, the way you act, the way you make your decisions, it's very real who you worship. So how do we embody this reality? How do we worship the giver of gifts? And Matt Chandler, he's a preacher out in Texas. He has this amazing analogy. I love listening to him, guys. If you just want to sit and listen to some man preach, this dude preaches, and I can listen to him all the time. But man, this guy has an analogy, and he's talking about food, and he's talking about steak, and he says, everyone can enjoy a good steak. Everyone can enjoy some good food. And you can chew it, you can taste it, you can eat it, and you can say, man, this is good steak, this is good food. The non-Christian who eats the steak, that's where it ends. You have the steak, you eat the food, and you say, man, that was good. The Christian can see the steak and see what he's eating and say, man, yeah, this is so good, this tastes so good, I love this food so much, but I know the one who created it. There's a deeper reality that is known, that when you're a Christian, you know who the giver of gifts is, the things that you have in life, the things that you will obtain in life. You can look at them and say, man, isn't my God amazing? Isn't my Creator incredible? And that should stir your heart to worship Him for what He is, or who He is, and what He's given you. You see, the gifts in life were never meant to satisfy us, just like it never satisfied King Solomon. There's only one place that we can look for fulfillment, and that's the person and work of Jesus Christ. Amen? Why? We sang it earlier. Because He's our author. He's our maker. He's our ransom. He's my Savior. He's my refuge, my hiding place. He's my helper, my healer, my blessed Redeemer, my answer, my saving grace. You're my hope in the shadows, my strength in the battle, my anchor for all my days. You stand by my side and you stood in my place. Jesus, there is no other name. This brings us to our big idea tonight, guys. It's the gifts of life that don't last. They point us to the one that does. The gifts of life that we have compel us to worship the one who has given them. And so I hope for you tonight, as you kind of look at Ecclesiastes and you look at this amazing book from the surface, it's like, it's all vanity, it's all fleeting, doesn't mean anything. I hope you don't see the depressingness of that. I hope you see the raw beauty and the weight of it. That, yeah, these things will never satisfy, but there's one who does. His name is Jesus. And I hope it would be true for you tonight, that we're going to sing this next song that embodies this message, that there is nothing else in this life. We can come with our own agendas, we can come with our religious motives, but Jesus is asking us to come as we are, to worship Him as the giver of gifts, to lay aside the distractions, to lay aside our agendas, and look at Him, who's the only one who can fulfill. Let's pray. God, I love this place. God, I love your word. I love you because you are the giver of gifts. God, you have given us more than we could ever possibly deserve. God, you are more gracious to us than we could ever earn. God, you are so merciful to us who deserve nothing but separation from you. But God, in your love for us, you went to the cross for us. You showed us that you loved us. And God, forgive us when we live our lives as though you don't exist. That we live our lives pursuing the things in our life that we know never leave us satisfied, craving for more. And I pray that every heart in this room would know that more, that thing that we're craving for, that satisfaction, we sang it already, it's you. There is nothing else. God, we love you for